ahead and get started now. You should all be hearing audio from me. Welcome to today's training. This is the District of Columbia Test Administration Training for Test Administrators. Today's training is scheduled for 2 hours, and we do anticipate using that full amount of time. At this time, I would like to just make sure that you are aware that we are recording today's training in WebEx. The recording will be posted at a later date, later this month, along with a Q&A document from the department. Okay. We will pause at various points in time throughout the presentation to answer questions about the information we're presenting. So as you have questions, if you could enter those into the Q&A to the right of your screen, we will be sure to answer those, and we'll let you know when we're about to pause and whatnot so that you can get those in there. My name is Stephanie Arroyo. I am a senior specialist here at Measure Progress. With me today, I also have Adrienne Hoyt, who is a project manager, and Erin Clark, also a program manager. Kelly Ickes is our assistant director of special education, and Chris Clough is our program manager. We are all part of the Client Services Division Special Education. From the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, we have Tanya Mead, the assessment specialist. She's our assessment specialist, administration for engagement, and the state MSA coordinator. We also have Michael Craig, who is the assessment specialist for special populations. We'll be covering a lot of information today. First, we'll be providing you an overview of the MSAA program as a whole, the training requirements and responsibilities of TAs, the important source documents which will become your go-to resources, as well as the technological requirements of the MSAA system. Following that more general information, we'll dive into how to access the MSAA system, and we'll cover what must happen before testing and how to navigate the system. And again, with some visual aids, we'll go over the requirements for after testing. We'll also cover assessment features and the use of assistive technology as well. Please feel free again to ask any questions using the Q&A box, and we'll address them as we get through this training today. As we proceed through this training, you will see 3 icons. The first is the green icon. This is the TAM, the Teacher Administration Manual. These next 2 are the TA and TC user guides, along with page references. If you see this icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen, there will be a page number where you can get more information on the topic that is being discussed. So we're going to go into an MSAA overview. We've made a lot of changes to the Test Administration Manual, the TAM. One of the things that we have done is we've added this page, the important dates page. This goes over all the key administration milestones throughout the year. We recommend that you post this somewhere visible throughout the remainder of the assessment. We'll take a closer look at those dates now. The administration window will open on March 27th. Your last day to submit requests for grade reassignments and to reopen a closed test is May 9th. The end of test survey must be completed by May 12th, and the MSAA administration window closes on May 12th as well at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Also on that important dates document at the bottom is this section with the link to the MSAA system, the MSAAassessment.org. You can find all of these go-to training documents and resources using this website here. The state-specific policy document, the test administration manual, and TA and TC user guides are all found under the resource section of this website. The test administrator and test coordinator training modules and final quiz is under the test administration tab, training tab. Sample items under the sample items tab. And then the directions for test administration, the DTAs for ELA and mathematics are under the action button in the My Students page. We just wanted to offer this as further direction as to where you can find these materials going forward so that they're not quite so hard. The purpose of the MSAA has not changed. It is still to ensure that all students are able to participate in an assessment that is a measure of what they know and can do in relation to the grade level content, state content standards. It also ensures that students with significant cognitive disabilities achieve increasingly higher academic outcomes and leave high school prepared for post-secondary options. It's also to meet the requirements of the Every Student Succeeds Act and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which require the participation of all students in assessments designed to measure student knowledge and ability on grade level content standards. The participation criteria for MSAA is located in the TAM on page 7. The participation criteria has not changed. The student still has to have a significant cognitive disability. The student is still learning on content linked to grade level content standards, and the student requires extensive direct individualized instruction and substantial support to achieve measurable gains in a grade and age appropriate curriculum. So this criteria has not changed. We've reorganized this material though in the TAM so that it's easier to find. This particular page was actually in the middle of the TAM last year, and it really needs to be up front. So this is now on page 7 of the TAM. The MSAA assesses 2 content areas, ELA, language arts, reading and writing, and mathematics. It is assigned to the state content standards and the MSAA core content connectors, and students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 take the MSAA. The MSAA is a one-to-one administration and is administered by a trained test administrator, and we'll talk about that training in a little bit. The formats are the same. There's a computer-based format and a paper-based format that's downloaded from the platform. When using the paper-based platform, the test administrator will enter the student responses into the online platform. Let's take a closer look at these 2 formats though. So for computer, laptop, or tablet, students who are fairly independent at using a computer or tablet may benefit from this type of administration. These students can manipulate a mouse and a keyboard with some independence. While these students may be fairly independent though, the TA must be present at the time of testing to ensure that the student has all necessary support, to monitor students for frustration and fatigue, and to ensure that all accommodations are appropriately administered to provide any necessary manipulatives and tools, as well as to ensure that the student does not accidentally click a button or close or submit a test accidentally. A computer administration is considered the standard administration for this test. However, you can also administer a paper version of the test, and this is for students who cannot use a computer or a tablet. These students typically use eye gaze boards or have a significant motor challenge that prevents them from being able to use a mouse, keyboard, or writing utensil. This accommodation may also be helpful for students who are easily distracted by technology. For example, they may focus more on clicking the answer options than paying attention to the actual items themselves. Students that benefit from this type of administration would also need the paper version and scribe accommodation documented in their IEP. Now, there is an option to have a hybrid, so you can have some computer-based and some paper-based. This is for students who have some ability to use a mouse and or have very limited keyboarding skills. For example, some students may be able to use a mouse to select their responses for short bursts of time, but then they need assistance when they become physically fatigued. Other students may be able to use a mouse to select their answers, but cannot type or need significant assistance. For students receiving this type of administration, accessibility features and test supports from both the computer administration and the paper version administration list may be used as necessary in order to preserve student independence and promote access to the test. Students benefiting from this type of administration would also need the paper version and scribe accommodation documented in their IEP, as I mentioned earlier. Please note that all student responses must be entered for session 1 before an assignment for session 2 can be determined. And we'll talk about session 1 and session 2, what that looks like in a little bit. But the main takeaway here is that you have to have session 1 responses submitted in the system before you can go to session 2, regardless of what format you're taking the assessment with. It is also important to remember that breaks in testing can be given at any time. There's no limit to the number of breaks a student can receive during testing. Regardless of the format that you're using, We get this question a lot, how long should I plan on setting aside for a student to administer the test? There's no direct answer for that because this is a one-to-one administration and every student is different. And we really want you to take those breaks and administer the test in a way that is beneficial to the student and will allow the student to perform their best. So we're not able to give a time limit on that. It really is up to the student and their needs. Okay. This is part of our what's new, which is a section that's coming up, but it's pretty exciting. The MSAA is becoming stage adaptive. Beginning this year, MSAA allows students to have a test experience that assigns the second session of the assessment based on how the student responds to a set of items in the first session. So this session 1 contains items from a broad range of tiers that all students will take. Stage 1, or session 1 as it's listed here, has varying difficulty and complexity levels in that stage. Each student will only take the session 2 version that is assigned to them. So let me back up. Session 1, students take every student will take session 1. It is made up of a variety of items at various complexity levels and difficulty levels. Every student must take this. All the answers must be submitted in this session before you can be directed to session 2. So every student will be directed to a test in session 2, a version A, a version B, or a version C, based on how they performed in session 1. They are only assigned to one version of the session 2. Once they complete session 2 and all the items have been responded to and accounted for, the system will then direct you to session 3, which is the writing prompt. The writing prompt is not stage adaptive. The writing prompt is assigned randomly to each student. So the key takeaway here with the stage adaptive is that all students take session 1. Based on how they perform in session 1, they're directed to session 2. They'll take only one of these sessions, and then when they complete session 2, they're directed to a randomly selected writing prompt for session 3. Mathematics operates in the same format. You have session 1 that is a mix of items at different complexity levels and varying difficulty levels. And based on how they perform in session 1, they'll be directed to a test in session 2, version A, B, or C. In mathematics, there is no session 3, okay? So again, all items have to be submitted for session 1 so that the test, you can know which test you're being directed to for session 2. This leads us into other things that are new for 2017. We've done a lot of work with the MSAA team this past year to incorporate changes that have been brought about by suggestions from teachers and lessons learned over the last year. These changes have been made to ease the administration process even more going forward, and we're excited to kind of share some of this work with you. Many things you'll see are around the organization of the TAM, the Teacher Administration Manual, but I think you'll be pretty excited about some of these things. For one, we are offering an online color version with hyperlinks and bookmarks of the TAM, and there's also a black and white print version that is available online as well for printing and whatnot. The organization of the TAM has been completely revised. We have a state MSA coordinators page right up front. It's page 1 of the TAM now. This is a page that has every state listed with every state MSA coordinator and their contacts and their hyperlinks and whatnot. We've also added an MSA Technical Support page that will help TAs and TCs know where and when to go get information. And we've also included the important dates document that goes over those key milestones and dates. Some other revisions in the TAM that we've done. Previously, the TAM was about 100 pages when you put it all together, and then you also had the procedures for assessing students who are blind, deaf, and deafblind. The procedures document for this assessing the blind, deaf, and deafblind has gone away. All that information is now embedded into the assessment features and accommodations section of the TAM. So that is, I think, an added benefit. We've cut down, reduced the information, and it's clarified a lot better. It's much more streamlined. I think you'll find that the TAM is a lot easier to understand and follow. We've also added vocabulary lists in both ELA and mathematics. These lists are located in the appendices as a resource for terms that are on the test. This document was created so that teachers and students would be familiar with these vocabulary words prior to the assessment, and you can begin teaching them as well as have them available for ASL signers. The other addition that we've made to the TAM, the Teacher Administration Manual, is we added TA and TC administration checklists. We'll talk about these in a little bit more detail in a little bit, but basically these two checklists inform the TA or the TC on the before, during, and after administration procedures, and allows you to kind of check them off as you move through the administration process. So this is, like I said, the color version of the TAM. As you can see, it has a little bit of a new look. This is the former procedures for assessing students who are blind, deaf, and deafblind. This document has gone away, and all that information is now embedded into the TAM, so you don't have multiple documents that you have to reference. I just want to make note, though, that if you have students who are identified as having low vision, no functional use of vision, undetermined functional use of vision, significant hearing loss even with hearing aids, or an undetermined functional use of hearing, you want to make sure that you review the assessment features and accommodations section in the TAM on pages 18 through 24, because that information was previously in that old document, now in the TAM. As I mentioned earlier, we've added the MSAA State Coordinators page. This page lists every single state, but for DC, District of Columbia, here's what your section looks like. You have your hyperlink here for information. This will take you to the state-specific policy documents for DC, as well as you have Tanya Mead, who is your state MSAA coordinator, her phone number, and her email, okay? When looking for the District of Columbia state-specific policy information, you must go to this website here to access that information. Okay, we'll talk about that document next. So the state-specific policy document, we asked all states, because all states have varying policies in MSAA, to create these documents for their state so that it clarifies what is required for their specific state. So your DC-specific policy document is about a 3-page document, and like I said on the previous slide, you can access that document by clicking on the link, and it'll take you there. This document covers information around test administration requirements, paper version of the test, training for the test administrators, test security, school test coordinator or test coordinator information, registering students and creating classes, and incident reporting, such as test security violations, students not completing tests, and open-closed tests, etc. So this is a document that you will want to go and download, okay? The MSA Technical Support document that I mentioned earlier, this is what this looks like. It's on page 2. And we've revised this to sort of provide 3 categories to inform TAs when they should reach out to their TCs or the MSA Service Center, and when TCs should then in turn reach out to Tanya, the state MSA coordinator. We'll discuss the supports later in the day, but for now, we just want you to know that we have streamlined the process for TAs and TCs and made adjustments and enhancements to the MSA Service Center. We have a brand new ticketing system, and all of our agents have gone through a very comprehensive training program in the platform and continue to get updates as those are necessary. So the key takeaway here is that we want to streamline how information and questions are getting asked and problems are being reported. So once you have reviewed the information in your TAM, your Teacher Administration Manual, or referenced your TA user guide, and you can't find the information or the solution, you would contact your test coordinator or the service center. From there, if you can't get the information that you need, your test coordinator, you contact your test coordinator, who would contact the state MSA coordinator, which is Tanya Mead. Okay, so we're just trying to streamline the flow of questions and streamline the information back so that we can make sure everybody on the MSAA teams are receiving the same information. As I mentioned earlier, we have test administrator specific responsibilities. We've developed a checklist for you. This document is located on pages 37 and 38. It's in the appendices of the TAM. It's also referenced on page 10. This document, I think, will be really helpful for you to follow along as you move through the administration process. It goes over the important responsibilities you have as TAs before testing. For example, completing the student profile for each student that you're testing. The student profile information has to be filled out in the system and includes tabs for demographics, the learner characteristics inventory, accommodations, and the student response check. And then it goes on to your key responsibilities for during the test administration, that you must follow the directions for test administration when administering the test, provide accommodations as indicated in the student's IEP and the TAM, and then maintain test security at all times. After testing, it talks about certain things like how to submit your test, reporting test irregularities, how to ensure printed copies of the test and GTAs are given, and how the test coordinator will complete the secure shredding, and how to complete the accommodations after test tab and the end of test survey. A couple things to note here just to make sure that we're on the same page. Printed tests and GTAs must be securely shredded, so those will go back to your TCs for secure shredding. Any ordered materials that are shipped and barcoded must be returned to measure progress using the return envelope with UPS labels provided, okay? Again, the TA checklist is just meant to be a tool to help you through the process and to make sure that you don't forget something in addition to the important dates document that you have. So we also created a checklist for test coordinators around the same idea. What do they need to know before, during, and after administration? They have very specific responsibilities as well. For example, before administration, they must complete the required training modules, and then they need to ensure that you, all the TAs, have received and completed your required training modules, and that you can access the MSAA online assessment system. They also need to ensure that technology capacities are met and provide administration support to you all. During administration, they need to monitor the administration of the test, maintain test security, and report any inappropriate test practices in accordance with the state policy, report security violations and test irregularities to Tanya Mead, the state MSA coordinator, and ensure that all tests have been submitted or closed by 8 p.m. Eastern time on May 12th. And after administration, TCs have to report all inappropriate test practices, security violations, and suspected irregularities to Tanya again as well as securely shred all the printed copies of the tests, the GTAs, scoring rubrics, and any student work that may have been generated. Again, these are just meant to be helpful tools, again, to help you through the process and help your TCs through the process of administration. There are no foundational reading items in grades 3 and 4 this year, so there is no need to identify verbal and nonverbal students. These items were the Braille items last year, so verbal and nonverbal students do not need a special form, and they will only need to be identified in the student learning characteristics inventory. This is the change that led to the procedures for assessing students who are blind, deaf, and deafblind document to go away. Because we don't have those items anymore, that information is not secure, so we took all the non-secure information, condensed it down for clarity purposes, and embedded it into the TAM. So that's why we were able to do that. The other piece, as we mentioned, we've become stage adaptive, and we've made advancements with the MSA platform. For example, it's been updated with new user permissions. TAs may no longer close a test. Only TCs may close a test, add or edit student records, such as the student ID, name, or grade. Okay, so that's a big change from last year, and we'll talk about it at multiple times throughout the couple of hours that we have together today. But TAs can no longer close a test. They don't have that ability. Only a TC can do that based on the student response check and the early stopping rule, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The evidence upload process has also been improved to be clearer. It allows for checking the uploaded evidence. And for ease of review, the form assignment and student profile grades have been added to the My Students page. And lastly, but not least, tablets and devices are now supported for test delivery. So that's a pretty exciting change. Let's move into the test administrator role, responsibilities, and training requirements. Every effort has been made to ensure that you're ready to administer the assessment with confidence. As a TA, you must complete all of the MSAA test administration training modules. The customized modules, along with this presentation, will help you prepare for the test administration. However, we really recommend that you spend time with all the documents, and we'll go over what those documents are momentarily. You really need to know the information that is in the TAM, the Teacher Administration Manual, the information that's in the Directions for Test Administration, and your user guide. The modules are available March 13th, that is next Monday. Again, they're customized for your TA needs, as well as they refer to the information found in the Test Administration Manual, Directions for Test Administration, and the MSAA System User Guide for test administrators. All TAs must complete the final quiz, and they also must score 80% accuracy in order to have access to the DTAs, those Directions for Test Administration. So once you complete all of the training modules, you'll take the final quiz. If you receive 80% accuracy, then you'll have access to the DTAs. If you did not receive 80% accuracy on the first try, you can absolutely go back and take that quiz again until you achieve an 80% accuracy score. Okay. We did have a question earlier today, is it an open book test? Of course it is, yes. We want you using the materials. Those are your reference materials, your go-to documents. So absolutely reference those materials as you go through the quiz as necessary. So some good news, there are only 6 training modules this year for TAs. That is a big change from the 13 that you had last year, so that's exciting news. Each of these modules are about 20 minutes in length. We're in the process of recording them now, so I don't have exact times for you, but you can plan on between 20 and 30 minutes per module. I know that there are a couple that will push that 30-minute mark, but for the most part, they're around 20 minutes. For any of you that may be viewing TC modules as well, I just want to highlight that Module 1, 2, and 6 are the exact same modules as the modules for TCs, so you wouldn't need to review those twice. Modules 3, 4, and 5 are different between TAs and TCs. So test coordinators are responsible for managing the administration of the test, and TCs must complete all 6 of their modules as well. So they had 4 last year, so they get a couple more this year, which I think will be really helpful. These modules are all available starting on Monday, March 13th, and again, they're customized to their specific responsibilities as a TC and refer to their documents that they would use, the Test Administration Manual, Directions for Test Administration, and the MSAA System User Guide for test coordinators. TCs are responsible for managing the administration of the test. They have to complete all 6 of the modules, again, by March 13th, and these are their 6 modules. As I mentioned earlier, modules 1, 2, and 6 are the same as the TA modules, okay? Modules 3, 4, and 5 are unique to TAs and TCs. So that's a lot of information. I would like to take a moment to pause. If there are any questions that you have on the information that's been presented thus far, if you could go ahead and enter those into the questions and answer section to the right of your screen. We'll take a moment to review those and answer them. Again, if you could keep it to the information that we've presented, we will get to all the system-related pieces a little bit later. And if there are policy questions, we'll do our best, but we may have to direct you back to Tanya for that information. So I'm going to go ahead and put us on mute for a couple minutes while we take a look at the questions, and I'll be right back to start responding to those. Okay, so we have a couple really good questions coming in. One of the first questions we received are the dates are March 27th through May 12th for administration. Are we allowed to test in March before our DCPS testing window opens? This is really a policy question. You need to check with your LEA district level POC, your district test coordinator. Generally, each testing campus follows the guidance and protocol of their LEA district testing campus for the administrative office. So you really need to check back with those folks. Okay. Somebody asked, can one session be split across multiple days, or does each session need to be completed in one day? That's really dependent on your student. We recommend splitting it across multiple days. Testing is long and not always that fun, so I recommend definitely splitting it up across multiple days. If your student is a student that can handle 3 back-to-back days, sure, you could do that. It's a one-to-one administration, so you're going to do what's best for your student and for them to be able to be administered the test and be successful with the test. So what are the specific dates for DC alt testing window, and are tests required to be started by a certain date or just completed at any point during the testing window? So the DC alt testing dates, I'm not sure if that refers to just MSAA, but the MSAA window is March 27th through May 12th. So there's no required start date for that test, but you do need to complete it by May 12th. And again, you can't access the directions for test administration until you've completed that final quiz. So you need to make sure all your training modules are done, you've passed the final quiz, so that you can access the directions for test administration, because you can't access that information prior to. Is there any others? I think that's all that's come in right now. I'm going to continue on, but as you have questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in. We have multiple stopping points, and we hope to have a couple minutes at the end for any remaining questions as well. Oh, and one last thing on the test coordinator responsibilities. Sorry, I forgot this. Test coordinators do not need to complete the final quiz. Only TAs complete the final quiz. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the important documents that you need to be aware of and be really familiar with. This table is located on page 6 of the TAM, and it provides you all of the required documents for test administration. The first and foremost is the test administration manual, the TAM, as this provides specific policies and procedures for TAs and TCs to prepare for the administration of the test. So we recommend that you get familiar with that document right away. Again, the directions for test administration, this is typically just used by TAs, but you'll need to get familiar with this document, those documents for your students, because they provide the specific directions and scripts for each item on the test. All test items are included in the DTA, but not all items are administered to each student because it's form specific. So you need to make sure that you are reviewing those DTAs prior to administration for each student. The DTAs also include details about manipulatives that are required in order to administer the test item, such as calculators and counters. It also includes reference sheets that contain important graphics and scoring rubrics for mathematics. For writing, it also provides the script and any mentor text as applicable. So you really want to take the time to review those directions for test administration prior to administering this assessment for each student. The other two documents that you have are the MSA Online System User Guide for test administrators and then one for test coordinators. The one for test administrators provides technical information and troubleshooting tips and step-by-step instructions to navigate the MSA online system, such as how to complete the LCI, that's the Learner Characteristics Inventory, how to pause and resume a test, how to submit a test for scoring, and when you should contact the MSA Service Center and how to administer such things as the student response check, which we'll spend in some detailed time in later. The test administrator, test coordinator user guide also provides technical information and troubleshooting tips and step-by-step instructions for navigating the online system, but it also goes in more detail because they have the ability to check to make sure that all TAs have completed their training, how to ensure that all students are properly registered, and they have the correct grade levels, as well as how to ensure that all tests have been submitted for scoring and how and when to close a student test. So these are the primary 4 documents that you need to be aware of, you need to spend some time with. I recommend that you start doing that as soon as possible. There are basically 3 item types for MSAA. There are the selected response items. These appear in both ELA mathematics sessions of the test. All directions and materials needed for administering the selected response items are in the directions for test administration, those DTAs, for the specific content area. Constructed response items are in mathematics only. These items ask the student to develop an answer instead of selecting an answer from answer options. So each item is presented to the student in a standardized scripted sequence of steps that accumulate in the TA scoring the student's performance using a mathematics scoring rubric and entering the response. The directions and materials needed for administering these items are also included in the directions for test administration for mathematics. And lastly, the ELA writing prompt. This requires students to produce a permanent product in response to a prompt. So each writing prompt DTA contains a standardized script and sequence of steps for the TAs to follow, a graphic organizer for students to make notes and plan their essay, a template to write their essay before it's typed in the computer or uploaded in the system, and mentor text is presented to the student as an example of finished product where necessary. This is sample items. So this is just a screenshot. It's an example of what a sample item looks like as it would appear online. Sample responses are not saved. You can see that the page is simply formatted with not too much distraction. The previous and next buttons are easily found. To pause a test, you would just click the Save and Exit button. And to access the list of assessment features, you would, in the sample items, you would just click right here on the sample items icon. This up arrow will produce this drop-down menu of assessment features that you could select. You can select as many as you need. Okay. Next, we're going to go over the toolbar in a little bit more detail. It's highly recommended that you practice using the toolbar buttons with these sample items. After starting the test, the first question in the test will be displayed. The item will be prominently displayed in the middle of the screen. And when applicable, a scroll bar will appear on the right-hand side of your screen. You can increase or decrease the size of the text and graphics by following your computer shortcuts. For example, on PCs, pressing the toolbar is at the bottom of each test item page. So let's go ahead and take a look at the specific features and functions of each of these pieces of the toolbar. So the Read Again button is for items that have multiple screens to navigate through. If the student wants to read an item or a passage again from the beginning, the TA or student would click the Read Again button and return to the display of the first screen of the item or first page of the passage. The previous button moves back one screen, and the next button will move you forward one screen. The questions list provides TAs and the student with a summary of the questions or items that have or have not been answered. By clicking on the item or question in the question list column, the TA or the student is directed back to the particular item or question that hasn't been answered. Items that the TA student bookmarked for further review are also displayed in this list. So that can be a very useful tool. This is the toggle button. The toggle button provides full screen mode for viewing an item. We highly recommend that you do use the toggle button to display in full screen mode so the student can't accidentally close a test or hit a wrong button, and they can also see a bit more of the test on one screen if you maximize that. The questions support button provides the TA with a phone number to the MSA Service Center should you experience technical difficulties and need assistance while the test is in session. This is a great little tool to use. Down here in the bottom left, this is where the student name is displayed. It's always in the left-hand corner. Clicking on the student name and the up arrow will provide those assessment features on the drop-down menu for selection. This last section displays the name of the test, the session that you're on, the current test question out of the total number of test questions, and this is where the TAs can verify the test, current session, and question that the student is on out of the total number of questions for that particular session. So this is a good way to double check that you're in the right test for the right student on the right item. This right here is the bookmark button. This bookmarks items that can be reviewed later, so that can be helpful if a student is getting frustrated with a certain item, but you don't want to ignore it completely. You can bookmark it to go back to it later. This is the evidence upload button. This button only appears for the writing prompt. This button will upload images of student work for the writing prompt. It is not available on the toolbar for reading or mathematics. So it's not, you won't see it for reading or math. It'll only appear for writing, so it won't be distracting. And then again, the save and exit button right here, this will save the test and exit you out of the test. Clicking the save and exit button is also how you would pause the test. All paused tests can be resumed later. Okay, we're going to look at a grade 8 sample item from ELA. This is also located on page 13 of the TAM. First, there's always going to be introductory text orienting the student to the passage and the questions the student will answer at the end. Next, the passage is read to the student aloud by either the TA or by using the computer. At the end of the passage, the student is asked if they would like the passage to be reread before the question is asked. And then lastly, a remember statement is included, and it defines the theme for the student in this context. So for this one, the question is, what is the theme of the story? And there are 3 answer options to choose from with visual support. The only time a question will appear at the end of an entire passage is when the focus is about the entire passage. For example, main idea, summary, or theme. So just one thing to note here as we look at the sample items, just please note that this slide shows an entire passage and the answer options displayed side by side, as it does in the TAM as well. This is just for presentation purposes only. This is not how they are typically displayed online or in the downloadable PDF. Okay. The questions and answers options are displayed on separate pages from the passages, so we'll discuss page breaks momentarily, so we'll hold off on that for a minute. The writing prompt for administration, there are Each grade span will assess 3 different writing styles. Each will assess 1 different writing style. There are 3 total. Elementary assesses literary, middle school assesses explanatory, and high school will assess argumentative and persuasive. The writing prompt provides steps to guide students through the writing process using stimulus materials for topic selection, choosing characters and supporting details, drafting, revising, editing, and producing a final story or essay. The writing prompt does require students to produce a permanent product in response to a writing prompt. Each writing prompt DTA will contain a standardized scripted sequence of steps for the TA to follow, graphic organizers for the students to make notes and plan their essay, a template to write their essay on before it is typed on the computer or uploaded into the system, and mentor text presented to the student as an example of a finished product for grades 3, 4, 5, and 11 only. Previously, we've been asked, well, why is mentor text not provided for all grades? That's because at the other grades, the mentor text is kind of embedded already into the item, so it's not needed. So mentor text is only at grades 3, 4, 5, and 11. There are 2 ways to capture student evidence for the writing prompt in the MSA online system. The first is to use a computer webcam to capture an image of the evidence, or you can scan the evidence using a scanner and upload the file as an attachment. Regardless of which method you use, you have to upload the evidence while the prompt is still on the test screen. Once the session is submitted, TAs cannot get back to the uploaded evidence. Okay? This is just a quick screenshot reminding you, it's from the TA user guide, that this is the upload evidence button right here. It is only visible during the writing prompt. You would select that button to upload using a webcam or attaching a file. You just select which one you want to use. Again, it's extremely important that you realize the evidence has to be submitted before the session has ended, because once you've submitted the session, you cannot upload any further evidence. So this page, once you have uploaded your image, there's a description box right here where you can add some text. This is just helpful if you want to add a little description about the type of document that you uploaded, whose it is, what it was, just as a note so that you can make sure what you intended to upload was what you actually uploaded. Once you're happy with it, you can just click the Attach Image button. If you're not happy with it, you can retake, just press the Retake button and you can rescan it and all that. When you have accepted the image, a confirmation message will appear. This evidence selected has been successfully uploaded, so you know that it's there. And then new this year, this is a big change, only JPEG files can be uploaded. So this is a system change. You have to upload JPEGs. Any other file format will not be accepted. There is information in the TA user guide on converting the JPEGs and whatnot, where you can go to get that information. But please know that only JPEGs are allowed for the writing prompt. So you need to make sure that you have JPEG files. For capturing student evidence, if you have a scanner or camera, this information is located on 31 of the TA user guide. You'll use, when completing the writing prompts, you're going to pause. You can pause the test, use the Save and Exit button while the item is displayed on the screen, and then you'll capture the student evidence or work using a scanner or the camera. But note some of these following bullets here. Some large-scale printers have built-in scanning functionality, so you want to check that out. School-issued cameras may be able to provide an image in the appropriate file type, that JPEG file that we were talking about. So you want to check out your devices that you're going to be using ahead of time to check for those features, because it may make things a little bit easier for you. Also, you will want to be sure that you can access the evidence files from your computer. You can do this by emailing them to yourself, sharing them to a shared drive that's accessible by the computer, and saving the files directly to the computer. One thing that's very important to note about the writing prompts, because they may contain identifying student information, such as the student's name, please be sure that you're handling the evidence according to the security guidelines outlined in the test administration manual, okay? This is one thing to double check. So that information is all located in the test administration manual back on page 12. So looking at Math Grade 3 sample items, math is presented in a similar format as ELA. The item will begin with a model telling the student what the item is about, and then following the model, the item will appear with the answer options, okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, page breaks often split up the questions from the answers. We know that this is not ideal because sometimes not all the choices are visible on the screen. There are solutions that you can look into. One is the scroll back bar, just using the scroll bar to display the answer options. One is the zoom, the control plus or minus. And the best method, the one we highly recommend, is if you have access to and your student uses a Promethean board or smart board, these will display the items, the bulk of the items on one page. So if you have a Promethean board or smart board, we highly recommend that you give the assessment with that if your student is familiar with that and uses it daily. Okay. We are still looking into this issue for next year, but this is where we're at for this year. The directions for test administration, as we mentioned earlier, the DTAs are content specific. They provide you with descriptive-specific instructions for administering a particular test. The additional materials for test administration are listed in each DTA. So if a list of manipulatives are required, those will be by form, as well as reference sheets. So paying attention to the DTAs is extremely important. One thing I want to note here, too, is the DTAs, much like the TAM, have been overhauled as well. There was a lot of front matter in the past that was very repetitive, didn't need to be there, so that has been condensed down and put into the TAM, and then so that the DTAs are truly just specific to what is required of that form of the test. So hopefully that will make weeding through the directions for test administration a little bit easier for you all. TAs should always reference the TAM, the DTAs for all directions regarding the test administration. As I said, each DTA is specific to the form of the test that is assigned to each student. And you can download the DTAs from the action button in the MSA online system. And this is the website right here, www.msaassessment.org. Okay. The one thing to note, though, you cannot access the DTAs until you've taken that final quiz and passed with 80% accuracy. Okay. You want to make sure that you read the directions, passages, and items and answer options exactly as they are written, using a consistent rate of reading and tone of voice is appropriate. There is no paraphrasing, substitution of words, and whatnot. You have to read it exactly as written. You want to be familiar with and utilize alternative text as appropriate. Alternative text is written in italics and will also appear in brackets within the DTAs. There are two types of alternative text that is provided. The first is alt text for students that includes standardized descriptive statements for tables, charts, graphs, timelines, and math flow to be read aloud to all students. And then the second is alt text for students who are blind or have visual impairments that includes descriptive tables also for tables, charts, graphs, but also any other graphic necessary for appropriate interaction with the items. So for example, an answer option that is a graphic that has no accompanying text, or a graphic that provides contextual clues for a sighted student. So there are two types of alt text that you'll want to pay attention to in the DTAs. So if the alt text for students who are blind or have visual impairments is not read by the computer, the TA must read this text aloud to the student as indicated by the TA. So don't forget that as well. This is a sample of the directions for test administration for ELA, that item that we looked at for the sample items. this is any text that in the script that has to be read aloud to the student is in black. So anything that's red will always be in black. And then anything that the TA must perform, any action, will be in gray italics here. So this action is point to and read each answer option. Okay, so gray italics means that it's an action, black means you read it. Okay, for mathematics, this is another example. Whether or not a calculator is allowed on an item will be identified at the beginning. We had a question on this earlier. What about students who have calculators in their IEP? Are they allowed to use them on these items as well? That is going to be a policy-specific thing that you'll want to reach out to Tanya on. We will be developing a Q&A document from these trainings, so we'll try to address it there as well. But this is really a policy piece that we can address because every state does something a little bit different regarding this one. So if you have a student who has calculator use in their IEP as an accommodation, you'll want to reach out to Tanya Mead, and her information will be at the end of this presentation as well. And it's also located on the first page of the TAM. Again, anything that this TA has to read out loud will be given in black. And then any action that you need to complete is in gray italics. And this is the alt text for students with visual impairments. It will always be in brackets with gray text, and it should be read aloud as necessary. In the past, there hasn't really been an issue with this, but it was brought up, so I'll address it here. As I said, gray italics is typically text that is an action. It's not something that's read aloud. But alt text, it appears in brackets, and it will tell you to read. It says, for students with visual impairments, read, and it goes on to tell you what to read. So for this example, A, this is a circle that is divided into 3 equal parts. 1 part is shaded. Because this is bracketed gray text, it is alt text, that can be read. So just want to make sure. We're going to look into maybe doing that a little bit differently next year. So far it hasn't been a big issue, but just know that if it's bracketed and it tells you to read, you can read it. Okay. So I think before we get into technology requirements, I just want to pause again here. It's a lot of information. If you have any questions about the sample items, how to access them, the directions for test administration, you can go ahead and enter those questions now into the Q&A. I'll pause for just a minute, and then we'll go ahead and address any questions that come through. During this time, I'll be on mute as well. So we received 2 questions already. Do students need headphones for the computer test? So let me start by saying it's a one-to-one administration. You do need to be careful when you're giving the assessment that other students are not able to see the test items or hear the responses as the student's being assessed. So for use of headphones, I think that's going to be really student-specific. If a student is used to using headphones, maybe for noise removal or for concentration, then yes, you can use headphones, but it's certainly not a requirement. I think that's going to be student-specific. The other question that we received, will TAs have access to all DTAs for session 2 since it is an adaptive test? Yes, you'll have access to all DTAs for that particular form that you receive for that student, and then you'll go through and whichever test that they are assigned to, you'll read that section of the DTA, administer that section. So you do have all sections. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to keep going. Please don't hesitate, though, to keep adding those questions in. We do have a couple more stopping points, and I think we're on a good track to still have some time at the end for any additional questions that might come up. So don't be shy. Let's get your questions answered the best we can today using the time that we have. Okay, so we're going to move on to technology requirements. MSA has been working really hard to keep up with technology requests and the changes. So we're happy to report that tablets and mobile devices are now supported for test delivery. When using these devices and operating systems listed here, you need to make sure that these systems, that you test these out with the sample items to make sure they interact the way they should. So Chromebook, iPad 2, iPad mini, Windows Surface, they are all available. Please remember, like I said, though, you really want to practice using those sample items and any devices that you plan on using prior to administration with the student. It'll also allow you to check the assessment features that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Test those out on the sample items and the devices that you're using to make sure everything is just working the right way. The other piece that we have is there's compatibility with interactive whiteboards, such as smart boards and bulletin boards. These are compatible to the MSA system, and we have received feedback from teachers that these interactive whiteboards work especially well as a tool for many students and really encourage their use. But again, as I said a few minutes ago, this is a one-to-one administration, so TAs really need to make sure that if they're using a smart board, that other students are not exposed to the content of the test or the student responses. So you can certainly have other students doing other things in another part of the classroom while you're assessing the student, but the other members of the class cannot be exposed to the content of the assessment. Okay? And as we mentioned earlier, the interactive whiteboards are the best way to display the bulk of the item on one screen or page, so you don't have those page breaks. So we do highly recommend that. The supported browsers, there are 3 major browsers, Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer, that are supported. Currently, we recommend the latest version of each of these browsers for the test. If you don't know what browser you're using, you can navigate to the site. It's called whatbrowser.org. This website will tell you what browser you're actually using, and it will offer you any upgrade for free that you may need. So this is a great resource to go to if you're not sure about which browser and version you're using. You really want to make sure you're using these versions that are listed here: Chrome 26 and above, Firefox 24 and above, Internet Explorer 11 and above. And the other piece to note about Internet Explorer is that Windows no longer provides security updates below Internet Explorer 11. So using a lower version is a security risk. So please make sure that you check these things out now prior to administration. The operating systems, in addition to the devices listed on the previous slide, delivery is supported on desktop computers with the operating systems listed here. So Windows and Macs are also acceptable. The next few slides that we're going to walk through how to access and use the MSA online assessment system, specifically looking at the support and features that are built into the system. So the entire test can be read aloud. There's use of manipulatives. There's picture and graphic supports that support what is read. There's the use of models and demonstrations, and common geographic shapes and small numbers in the math tests are available. Okay. The way that you activate the features in the assessment system, the MSA system, again, is you click on the student's name or this drop-down arrow. It will bring a drop-down box, and you can select any one or as many assessment options that you would like to use with the student, okay? The one thing to note about this, if you pause and resume the test, these are deselected, so every time you re-enter the test, you need to reselect the assessment feature options that you would like activated, so that's something important to remember. okay? You can increase or decrease the size of text and graphics and volume through the computer's browser or operating system. Most computers provide a magnification or zoom function. Using the control key and the plus sign key at the same time will increase the size of text on a screen. Projection systems and video magnifiers via closed-circuit television systems can also be used to increase size. This is the answer masking feature. This allows a student or TA to electronically cover answers to reveal one answer choice at a time. You would simply select the hide or show button, and it will gray out the other answer options, okay? A TA may use masking with a paper administration as long as the TA does not mask answer choices in a way that would cue the correct answer. This is the background font color contrast feature. The student or TA can change the screen background and or font color, the color contrast based on the needs or preference of the student by selecting the alternate color theme in the assessment feature menu. Take a closer look at that. There are 5 colors here that can be selected. The one thing I want to note though, when you choose an alternate color theme, anything that's considered a graphic, such as these number lines you see, or the numbers here, 1/2, this is math font. These are considered graphics, so they will still appear white. So when you're choosing a background and color font contrast, it truly does just change the background, and certain graphics and whatnot will remain white. So you want to be careful with that, if that will be distracting. The other thing we have is the line reader assessment feature. This tool, when activated, it draws the student's attention to one or a few illuminated lines at a time while shading the remaining screen. The TA or student can control the placement of the line reader with the computer's up or down arrows. So you can see how the back is all gray, and it will illuminate one line at a time. This is the magnification tool. This feature also allows the user to zoom in on and enlarge 2 lines of text at a time. So you'll see that the rest of the text is grayed out, and it will enlarge 2 lines of text at a time. The read aloud, the TA may read aloud the item directions, response options, passages, as often as is reasonable to obtain a student's response to an item. All text must be read to students exactly as it is written. The TA may not paraphrase or vary speech to emphasize words in a way that would hint at a correct or incorrect response. So accommodations, we know that accommodations are changes in material or procedures of the assessment, but they don't alter what is being measured. Just want to make sure everyone's aware that any accommodation must be documented in the student's IEP and routinely used in their daily instruction. Okay. There are 4 allowable accommodations: assistive technology, the paper version of the test, scribe, and sign language. Okay, these have not changed. These are the same allowable accommodations that MSA has always had. But if you go to page 24 of the TAM, you will see that we've updated their descriptions a little bit, so hopefully make them a little bit clearer about what's allowed and what's not allowed. So I do recommend that you go ahead and take a look at page 24 and just read up on that section as well. Okay. Remember, if you're using assistive technology, you really do need to test this assistive technology with your student using the sample items prior to actually administering the test, using the devices that you're going to use during assessment. Okay. If you're going to have a scribe, you need to refer to Appendix A, the scribe accommodation protocol. That is very important. Again, remember, these all need to be on the IEP. Okay. I'm going to pause again here. Are there any questions about the assessment features or accommodations at this time? Okay, I don't see anything coming in. Again, if something comes to you, please don't hesitate to put it in there because we will have plenty of time to address the questions. I'm going to turn this next section over to Adrienne Hoyt. She will walk you through how to access and use the MSAA online system, just a high-level overview. So I'm going to turn it over to her for a few minutes. Hi, everybody. I'm going to, in the next few slides, walk through how to access and how to use the MSAA system. So when new users are added to the system, they receive a welcome email from MSAA Service Center at measuredprogress.org. And the email contains information about the MSAA system and about your account. And at the bottom of the email is a temporary link used to access your account for the first time. And when you click that link, it will take you into the system and ask you to set a new password and then confirm that you've logged in for the first time. It's important to note that that link in the welcome email can only be used once. So once you set your password, you'll click Save. The page will confirm that you've chosen a new password, and then you can navigate back to the dashboard. You may want to add the MSAA Service Center at measuredprogress.org to your district's filter or safe list so that that email comes through and it isn't blocked by a spam filter. We received some questions previously about what to do if you don't have an account yet or if you haven't received your welcome email. So if you haven't received that welcome email yet or you don't know if you have an account, you should reach out to your test coordinator to ask about getting access to the MSAA system. So once you have created your account and created your new password, you'll access the MSAA system by using the URL shown here, msaassessment.org. When you access that page, you'll be brought to the login screen that you see here. You'll enter your email as your username, and then in the password, you'll enter the password you chose on your first login. And we do recommend that you bookmark this page so that you don't have to go searching for it in the email. Okay. Then once you've logged in, you'll be taken to this dashboard screen as your home page. You can navigate within the system using this top navigation bar or by clicking these tiles at the bottom of the screen. So the options that you can access here are the dashboard, the test status summary, the My Students tab, sample items, and the test administration training page. So the test status summary page provides you with a summary of each student's test to track and monitor progress during the test administration. You can only view tests that are assigned to students you are testing. So if you are assigned to more than one classroom or school, you'll need to use a drop-down menu from that page to view the test status summary for those different organizations. To access that page, you'll click the test status summary option in the navigation bar or the My Test tile at the bottom of the screen. Those will both take you to the test status summary view. Next is the My Students page. The My Students page has been changed a little bit this year. There's some new information. The information displayed from left to right is the system-generated student ID. That's the student identifier assigned by the system, the school or state-issued student ID, the organization, which is the school or classroom that the student is assigned to. Then under student information, you'll see the student's first and last name, as well as their student demographic grade. That's the display of the student's demographic grade is new this year. Under test name, you'll see the assigned test, and that now includes the form assignment, which it last year didn't. Under test status, it's going to display the same status that you would see under the test status summary, which is not started, in progress with, paused by, submitted by, or closed by. And then that next column, test administrator, those two columns kind of work together. That it shows you the test administrator that has the test in that status. For example, that first line, paused by Joseph Lewitt, that is the TA who pause that test. So those two columns work together so you can see the test status and who put the test into that status. Then you'll see the actions menu. That is the menu you would use to start or resume a test, print the PDF version of a paper test, and print the DTA, or to go to the student profile. Once the test has been submitted, that's also where you would access the end of test survey. So you'll also use the My Students page to access your student profile and access test materials, and then start and resume the student test. So to access the sample items from the navigation bar, you would click Sample Items, and that will take you to the Sample Items page. All users have access to the same set of sample items. There are sets of items for math and ELA representing each grade band, and this is a great opportunity for you and your students to become familiar with the online administration features, as well as to test some of that assistive technology with the system to make sure it works. Once those items become available, you can access them at any time. So this screenshot shows you the options to print and download from the system. So to view the sample items online, you would click the sample items button from the home screen, then Actions, then you would select Start Test in that Actions menu. To print the sample items, you would click Actions and then Download PDF. So before administering tests to students, the TA is required to complete the student profile, which includes reviewing the demographic information, the learner characteristics inventory, or LCI, the accommodations before test, and the student response check, the SRC. So the following slides will show us, will guide us through those steps, but the SRC, Stephanie's going to talk about in a little bit more detail. So as a TA, you must provide the information in all of the tabs of the student profile, which are the demographics. This contains general information about the student, including the school and classroom assigned to the student. This is the tab that you would review rather than edit, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. The LCI, that's the learner characteristics inventory. This tab includes the LCI items, and it just provides a description of the characteristics of the students who participate in the test. The accommodations before test is where you would select the accommodations that are documented in the student's IEP. And the SRC tab allows you to launch that content-neutral test to determine if the student's responses can be observed, and then you would respond to the follow-up questions on that tab. So to access that student profile, you would click My Students either from the navigation bar or from that tile from the home screen. And then a list of your students will appear. If your user account, again, if your user account is associated with more than one organization, you'll need to select that organization from the drop-down menu. So now that we have ourselves in the student profile area, we'll look at some of the tabs that are in there. So that first tab that you'll come to is the demographics tab. So you'll see some general information about the student, including the grade, the student's grade assignment. So this is the tab that TAs should review, and if any changes are needed, contact your test coordinator. And please note that this is a change from last year. The save button and making edits to those fields are not available to TAs. Once the demographics have been reviewed, you click on the LCI tab. So the information from the learner characteristics inventory provides a description that includes 16 learner characteristics of the students who participate in the MSAA. I won't read the whole list, but examples are the primary language, classroom setting, expressive communication, receptive language, vision, and reading. The test administrators have to complete all sections of the LCI tab. There are 16 items, and there must be a response to each of them. Once you've clicked on the LCI tab, there are drop-down menus that include descriptions of each characteristic, and some items are radio buttons. The TA should preview the fields and obtain the required student-level information so that it can be entered accurately into the MSAA system before administering the test. The tab is completed by making selections for each of those items in the LCI. And be sure to scroll all the way to the bottom of the tab. It's a little bit longer than the other tabs in the student profile, so make sure you are scrolling all the way to the bottom to see all of those items. Only one response per topic is allowed. And for the vision topic, if you select low vision or no functional use of vision, that causes the audio player to include files that describe the visual elements of an item. After you've completed the tab, you'll click that Save button either at the top or bottom of the screen, and the system displays a confirmation that the tab has been updated with the information you entered. Once you've completed the LCI tab, you would move on to the Accommodations Before Test tab. So the Accommodations Before Test tab must be completed before the student test is started. And that's true of the LCI, the Accommodations Before Test, and the SRC tab. You'll select all the accommodations that are documented in the student's IEP. You may not choose paper pencil if it is not in the student's current IEP. If the student does not need any accommodations, you would select that last option, check the box if the student does not need any accommodations. And this tab is required, so at least one box has to be checked on this tab in order for it to be considered completed. After you complete this tab, you would move to the SRC tab to complete the student response check, and Stephanie's going to walk through the SRC in detail now. Oh, are there any system-related questions? Yeah, so the sample items tab will become available on Monday, the same day that the modules and the quiz become available. When you access the site on Monday, you'll see that test administration tab as well as the sample items tab that currently you're not seeing when you log into the system. Okay, I don't think I see any questions coming in, so we're going to go ahead and talk about the SRC, the Student Response Check. Okay. The purpose of the SRC, the Student Response Check, is to ensure that a TA can clearly understand a response the student has indicated for a test item. If the student's response to a test item is not clearly observable or is not understood by the TA or a scribe, then the TA or scribe cannot enter the student's response into the MSAA system. The SRC is a content-neutral task during which a student is asked to demonstrate their preferred mode of communication. Just a note here, a student may use as many or as few communication modes as they are comfortable with and use on a daily basis. Student answers to the items on the student response check are not scored. It's clearly just looking for the observable response. And we've spent a lot of time on this section of the TAM this year. We know that from past years, there was a lot of confusion as to when to administer the SRC, how to administer it, when to apply the early stopping rule, what is an observable response. So we've spent a lot of time here, and we've defined observable response as a predictable and consistent behavior or movement that is able to be understood by a communication partner as intentional communication. It demonstrates intent toward the task, and the student responds to or shares information about the stimulus, the test item. A student who's assigning meaning to habitual or uncontrollable motor movement or vocalizations without communicative intent, these are not considered response modes. The modalities, there are many that can be used: eye gaze, reliable gestures, sign language, partner-assisted scanning, scanning on a device, direct selection from an array of choices, activation of a voice output device, use of speech-generating devices, or another reliable means. Okay? The key here is that it has to be an observable, intentional response. The observable response is predictable and consistent. It went backwards. Sorry, guys, it went backwards. So we're going to jump ahead to physical prompts. The physical prompts is the use of hand over hand. This is not considered an observable response because the student is not indicating his or her answer choice in an independent way. So physical prompts are not allowed and is not considered an observable response. To help everyone out, as I mentioned, there was a lot of confusion last year. We've developed a flow chart to help you determine when to administer the SRC and when TAs should close a test. So the flow chart that we've developed should be used to determine when to administer the SRC and when TAs should contact their district or school test coordinator to close the test and apply the early stopping rule. TAs do not have the ability to close a test. This is new this year, as Adrienne mentioned, and I think we've mentioned earlier. TAs don't have the ability to close a test and apply the early stopping rule at all. Okay. TAs can administer the SRC using a paper version or a computer version and a mouse. That is fine. When administering the SRC, please keep in mind that the student's responses do not need to be correct. They just need to be observable. The student can use as many or as few communication modes as necessary. The key here is that the modes should be used on a daily basis by the student. And not all of the response modes are listed in the SRC. So if there's a preferred response mode that's not listed, make sure you enter it in the other box on the SRC tab online. The early stopping rule cannot be applied based on the student's behavior, stamina, knowledge of the content, or frustration level. The SRC must be administered at least once for those students where the TA is not sure that they have an observable response. The other thing, if you would like to administer the SRC more than once, say the student did not give you an observable response, but you think in a couple days, a couple weeks that they are going to be able to, you can re-administer that SRC and start the process again. Okay, so this is the flow chart that we're going to go over next that we have put in the TAM. It's on page 35. Basically, you start here and you ask yourself, does the student use one or more of the communication modes consistently? It lists mouse and computer, verbal response to test items, touch screen, gesture point, circle responses on paper, versions of the test, clock scanner with a switch, scanning devices, eye gaze, or other. If yes, you can stop. You don't need to administer the SRC. You're going to select all the response modes that the student will use during testing in the SRC tab. If no, you're going to administer the SRC using the modes of communication that the student is familiar with. Use either the paper or computer version of the SRC. All modes of communication used regularly by the student may be used at the same time. And then you're going to ask again, did the student demonstrate an observable response? If yes, you can open the student's, you can administer the MSAA test in both ELA and mathematics. The test can no longer be closed due to the early stopping rule. If no, you're going to open the student's test to mathematics and or ELA and from the actions button on the My Students page, and you'll administer the first 4 test items of either or both tests. Again, you'll ask yourself, did the student demonstrate an observable response? If yes, you can continue to administer the MSAA test for both ELA and mathematics, and the test can no longer be closed due to the early stopping rule. If no, the student does not have a consistent observable response, you will need to contact your district or school test coordinator and discuss the results of the SRC. At that time, the TC will determine if they can apply the early stopping rule and close the test. Okay, so again, we tried to make it much more clear this year. There's a flow chart, I believe on pages 34 and 35 are the pages that deal with the SRC. Please use the flow chart when you're determining whether or not the student has an observable response format. So this should help you a lot. We think so far we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about it. On this page, let's take a look at how to conduct the SRC in the MSA system. First, you would click on the SRC tab. There are two ways that you can conduct the student response check. One is using the computer, or the second is using a paper version. You would click the Start Computer Student Response button if a student can indicate a response to an item by using a mouse to select an answer. They can verbalize answers. They can use gesturing or pointing to the answer, or they can use assistive technology to answer items. For students to communicate using gestures, eye gaze, or other modes of communication that make using a computer difficult, you would conduct the SRC using the paper version of the test. Okay. Let's talk about the paper version of the test. So you would click, on this page, you would click on the paper version of the response check right here to access the SRC for printing. When you start the SRC on the computer, you and the student will see an introduction to the SRC with some general directions on how to proceed. You'd click the Next button at the bottom of the page to proceed to and through the SRC items. After the student completes the SRC, you'll be returned to the SRC page within the MSA system. Again, you'll check all that apply in the SRC tab. A verification question will appear under the check statement. You'd select yes or no to proceed. And then after completing the SRC tab and the demographics and LCI and accommodations before test tabs, as described in this section, you would click the Save button at the bottom of the screen. More information on the SRC is located in the TAM under Implications of Student Response Check section, as well as in the user guide for test administrators. Okay. I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions about the SRC, the student response check, or the early stopping rule? I don't see any questions coming in regarding the SRCs or the early stopping rule, but we did have one question that came in regarding the information that Adrian went over. What if you've never got an email asking you to log in? If you never got the welcome email asking you to log in, you'll need to contact your test coordinator so that you can get set up with that. So everyone should have received their welcome emails by now. So if you haven't received one, you need to get in touch with your test coordinator as soon as possible. Okay, in this section, we're going to talk about how to locate, start, and resume a test or perform other test actions available for each student in the MSAA system. You're basically ready to begin if you've verified that you have all the right technology necessary for testing. All students have gone through some of the practice items. Again, this is really key. You want to go through those practice items with the devices and the assistive technology that you'll be using, along with the accommodations and assessment features that you may be using prior to the assessment. You have to have finished all the training modules, and you have to have passed that final quiz with at least 80% accuracy. You have downloaded all the directions for test administration for the DTAs, and you've completed the student profile. Okay. On this screen, DTAs provide you with specific instructions for administration of a particular test in the ELA or mathematics. Each DTA will provide you guidelines on how to present the item to the student, exact wording of the item to use, and the materials needed to prepare for the test. So you would go to the Actions menu, and you would select TA directions and follow the directions from there to download the examiner instructions. To save and exit, we've talked about this a couple times already today. If a student needs a break from the test, whether it's a few minutes or a few days, but hasn't completed the test, all you do is click Save and Exit. This will bring up a prompt right here. Are you sure you want to save and exit your test and come back later? You would click Save and Exit. Once you do that, a confirmation message indicates that all the students' answers have been saved and that you can return to the test at a later time. Okay. When you return, you'll be returned to the My Students page, and the test will return you to the same item that you left off with. Each TA can only have one student test open at a time. This is key. You always want to pause and save a student's test when taking a break. This test is easy to resume where you left off. Like I said, if you pause and exit, you will be returned to back to the exact same item. So should a student's test be left open and you've opened another test, this creates an issue. It's called, you'll have an in-progress status, and it's actually a locked test. So if you have a locked test where it says in progress, you will need to contact the help desk to get unlocked. Okay. So again, the key takeaway from this slide is that you can only have one test open at a time. Make sure you pause and save so that you don't create that in-progress locked test status because you will have to contact the service center and get unlocked. At the end of a test session, a prompt will notify you that you've completed the session. It'll show how many items have not been answered and have an option to go back to look at your work or finish the session or to move on to the next section. There will be a confirmation prompt that will appear asking you to confirm that you really want to submit the session and move you to the next session. Please note that once you have moved to the next session, you cannot return back to the previous session. So once you hit finish session, you cannot go back to session 1 or 2 if it's ELA. Again, we just want to reiterate, TAs can pause and resume the administration of the test as often as necessary during the whole administration window. A break can consist of a few minutes to a few days depending on the student's needs. This is really a student-by-student individual decision, so please make sure that you are using this as you need to use it. It is absolutely fine. To close a test, a student's test can only be closed if the criteria for the early stopping rule is met. So again, that is if the student did not display an observable response during the SRC, the student response check, and the TA administered the first 4 test items in either mathematics or reading, and the student's response was not observable to any of the first 4 test items. Okay. The ability to close a test is only available to TCs once that criteria has been met. If a student withdrew or is no longer eligible, the TA must contact the TC and or the state MSA coordinator who will then close the test. When you're ready to submit, so you've reached the end of your the test, this prompt will appear. It will ask if you would like to review your current session, submit your test, or save and exit. If you click submit, it will ask you to confirm before your submission. Okay. And again, it will show you on the screen how many unanswered items you have out of the total number of items. After closing a test or submitting the test for each student, you must enter the accommodations that each student used during the test, as well as complete the end of test survey. So after the assessment's been completed, you will actually go in and complete the accommodations after test tab. This tab refers to the accommodations that were actually used by the student for the test, not all the ones that were made available, just the ones that they actually used, okay? And then test administrators also need to follow the information for the MSA system related to all students by completing one end of test survey. Okay. Following the administration, the TA will record the accommodations after test tab, again, for the accommodations that the student actually used during the test, not the accommodations that were made available. So this orange box is just really important. It's the key takeaway from this slide. And make sure you're documenting what they actually used, not what was available. To access the student profile to complete the accommodations after test tab, log into this MSA system and select My Students link from the navigation panel. The My Students page displays a list of students being tested. You'll locate and select the student whose tests have been submitted. Click on the student ID number, the hyperlink in the first column, and then you click on the accommodations after test tab. You'll select the accommodations the student actually used during testing, and more than one option can be selected. If the student did not use any accommodations, you would select the last option and then click the Save button when finished. Each TA completes one end-of-test survey. The end-of-test survey has been developed to learn more from the experience of each TA who administers the MSAA test. After the TA has completed the testing for all students, each TA will complete one end-of-test survey. Please refer to the MSAA System User Guide for test administrators for the specific information on how to complete the end-of-test survey. The survey is essential in providing additional data about how the test functions for students with the unique and varying needs, as well as student engagement in the test, and gives us the opportunity to learn more about the content represented by the state content standards, as well as complete the survey responses supported for potential revisions and refinements to the MSAA for subsequent years. And we do track this information, so every single response is looked at, evaluated. We do use it, so please take the time to fill out this survey and provide your feedback, because we really do look at it with all of the states. To access the end-of-test survey, you're going to go to My Students, and then go to the any student who's with a submitted test. You can click on the Actions button in the students row with the submitted test. You'll select Go to Survey, and then the end-of-test survey launch screen will open. And then you just read the instructions provided on the launch page and then proceed with the survey. Again, you only need to do this one time. Each TA completes one end-of-test survey. Just some reminders of additional support. As we mentioned very early on, we have a kind of a three-tiered process for reaching out to the service center. After you've reviewed your test administration manual, your user guides, your DTAs, and you still can't find the answer, or you're having technical difficulties, TAs will reach out to their test coordinator or the MSA service center. And then if the test coordinator needs to, they will reach out to the state MSA coordinator, who is Tanya Mead, for this process. Again, we're just trying to further improve the timeliness of the service center responses, to log and track the Q&A that's coming in from the field, and better inform all the TCs, the test coordinators, regarding the communications that are coming in and the communications to all the state MSA coordinators. So if you could use this approach going forward, that would be really helpful. When contacting the service center, please provide as much detail as possible about the issue in the system which it is occurring on. Make sure you leave your contact information. I like to stress that you should leave your contact information when you first leave your message and at the end of your message, because we get so many calls, people who forget, they give us all this great detail about the problem, but then we have no way of contacting them to solve the problem. So make sure you give your name, state, district, school, phone, and email information. If a student name, if applicable, just remember that you should not be emailing student identifying information. You can leave this on the voicemail of the service center, but do not email any student-specific information. If you get an error message regarding the MSA system, you want to let us know what appeared, and the operating system and browser information if you have it, as well as any information about the network configuration. Again, this is just about the student identifying information. Please remember, if you have a student-specific issue, that you really should call the service center instead of emailing for assistance to get that support. The MSA Service Center is available from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for all TAs and TCs to answer questions about the MSA system and the test administration procedures. So please call or email with your questions using this information. This is also on page 2 of the TAM, your test administration manual. In addition to the Service Center, you also have Tanya Mead from the Office of State Superintendent Office, and she is available to you as well as your MSAA State Coordinator. Her phone number and email is located here, as well as the link to the DC page. Remember, this link is where you will find your state-specific policy documents, so I highly recommend that you guys go there, print that today so you have that. But also, Tanya is a great resource for someone to reach out with. At this time, we have about 10 minutes. I want to honor our time commitment, but we can answer some more questions. I see a couple have come in. As the TC, once I access the MSAA, how do I register or grant a TA usage to the site? I'll let Adrienne answer that one.
So the instructions to add users or upload users are available in the TC user guide. I can pull up an exact page reference if that's helpful. And that will tell you how you can add other users into the system. For and just to make sure I'm clear on that, that's the user guide for test coordinators. Adding users is something that only TCs can do. If the TC's email is in the system incorrectly, how do we get it changed? So to get a TC's email corrected, you have to go to your test coordinator. So if it's a school TC, they would contact their district test coordinator, who would have access to update their user profile in the system. If it's a district test coordinator, they would need to contact the state test coordinator, who is Tanya Mead, to make the update to that account.
Okay. I don't see any other questions coming in, so just some closing comments and next steps. Starting on Monday, you'll have access to the sample items and the training modules. I recommend that you start going into those next week. There was a lot of information that we went over in a very short amount of time today. A lot of this information will be reiterated in those training modules next week. So you have access to those starting Monday. After today's training, you'll receive a survey link from Erin regarding today's training. If you could just take 5 minutes to complete that, that will help us with feedback for future webinars and trainings that we'll be doing. It's really short. It's only about 5 questions, I think. So if you could complete that, that would be great. Again, if you have any questions, any issues with the service with the system, just reach out to the service center. We're more than happy to get right on those for you. We're here. And don't forget to reach out to Tanya if you're experiencing any issues as well. Okay. So at this time, I don't see any other questions coming in. I'll remain on the line for a few more minutes. If you're all set, you can log off. And also just a reminder that the recording from today's webinar, as well as the Q&A, will be made available at a later date in the coming weeks from Tanya. So that will be made available as another resource as well. So thank you so much for your time and hanging in there with us. We appreciate it. We hope this was really helpful for you. Have a great afternoon.